From the newsrooms of the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, this is Please Explain. I'm Samantha Salinger-Morris. It's Monday, December 18th. It's a real-life succession saga, and it's taking place right on our doorstep. We're talking, of course, about the civil lawsuit that Australia's richest person, Gina Rinehart, is embroiled in with two other families, not to mention two of her own children. They're all battling over more than $1 billion in royalties from iron ore mines that her father discovered back in the 1950s. Is the fight worth it? The cost for Rinehart, even if she wins, could still be high. Because for years, the mining magnate has been fighting another competing battle to keep her tricky and sometimes fractious relationships with her own family members out of the public eye. Today, WA Today journalist Jesinta Burton on what this marathon court case has revealed about one of Australia's most secretive families. So, Jesinta, West Australian mining magnate Gina Rinehart has been embroiled in a legal fight for more than a decade now, and I will want to get into who the main players are in that stout. But first, I was hoping you could begin by telling me about Gina Rinehart. She's arguably Australia's wealthiest and most secretive woman, so who is she?
Yeah, you're right. So this legal battle has garnered a lot of attention, and I think it's in good part because it's offered a really intimate insight into the life of Australia's richest person, Gina Rinehart, and she's again topped the Australian Financial Review's rich list. She is worth an eye-watering $37 billion. She was born in Perth back in 1954, but she spent much of her childhood in the red dirt of the Pilbara.
I was very fortunate to be brought up on two stations in Australia's northwest, Mulga Downs and then Hammersley. So my first career as a child was helping on the stations. I love station life.
She travelled to Sydney to study economics at university, but she actually dropped out. And she dropped out to join her father, working alongside him at the family empire Hancock Prospecting.
Lang Hancock is the reason for this massive industry. With partner Peter Wright, he discovered the original deposits.
Now, at the age of 19, she met her first husband, Greg Milton, and the pair had two children, John Hancock and Bianca Rinehart. But 2 years after the pair divorced, she met Frank Rinehart, a corporate lawyer with whom she would have two more children, Hope and Gina. As his only child, Gina had a really strong relationship with Lang and was often considered by most as a bit of a protege, if you will, and she was heavily involved with his business dealings.
Whilst I keep her up to date with what I'm doing, because eventually she will have to run it, I would think.
Upon Lang's death, he actually left a bankrupt estate. He had a host of mining assets, but none of which were, currently generating enough income to support the empire. And Gina Rinehart famously turned that around. She inherited the empire and she essentially turned it on its head.
As iron ore mine after iron ore mine opened, and much benefit was brought to the previously remote and somewhat inhospitable region.
She went and sought the necessary deals to generate income, and that included the deal with Rio Tinto to support the development of the Hope Downs mine at the centre of this legal battle.
Okay, and so Gina has been embroiled in this mammoth civil suit, and it just wrapped up last week. So what is this lawsuit all about?
So it's funny, it's been dubbed a real-life succession. And honestly, I think that's probably the only way to really do it justice, because we're talking about a lawsuit which has pitted the country's richest person against two of this state's wealthiest iron ore dynasties and her own two children.
It's a legal fight more than a decade in the making over mining riches worth billions of dollars.
So on one side, you've got Gina and you've got the family empire that she rebuilt after she was left it from her father. And on the other, you've got her father's business partner, Peter Wright. So Wright's descendants actually started the action back in 2010, and they dragged Hancock Prospecting to court because they claim that they were entitled to basically a share of the spoils in Hope Downs, which is a mammoth iron ore mine, 4 open pit mines that she co-owns with Rio Tinto via Hancock Prospecting.
The mining partnership between Peter Wright and Lang Hancock created dollars, dynasties and divisions that last to this day. Those divisions are now playing out in court, with lawyers for the family of Mr. Wright arguing that Hancock Prospecting, now run by Gina Rinehart, breached a long-standing agreement by developing a series...
Now, they say that under a 1980s partnership deed, which entitled them to half of the 2.5% royalty from the mine's output, that they should have been receiving funds from 2007. So we're talking billions of dollars, and they've brought documents to back that up, which they claim show that actually Gina's known she should have been paying them since, well, the 1980s basically, and that she even discussed it when she signed on the dotted line with Rio Tinto. And then you've got the heirs to the estate of Don Rhodes, who was a business associate of Lang's back in the day, and he is alleged to have had his own deal with the original two mining magnates who had the Hand-Wright partnership. And then you've got Bianca and John.
A number of other parties are involved, including Ms Rinehart's two oldest children. John Hancock and Bianca Rinehart also seeking claims to the Hope Downs fortune, which they say their grandfather left them.
But really, it all sort of centres around Hope Downs, and this is, for those who aren't familiar with WA's mining industry, this is a sprawling iron ore deposit. It's about 100 kilometres northwest of Newman, and it's right in WA's iron ore heartland, and it produces about 50 million tonnes of iron ore each and every year. So it earns Hancock Prospecting billions of dollars.
Okay, so Jesinta, you've taken us through the two main families who are involved in this legal stoush, and they're the descendants of two former business partners of Lang Hancock. That's, of course, Gina Rinehart's father. But through this case, two of her children have made fairly explosive allegations against their mother. So what can you tell me about what they've alleged?
So they claim that back in 1988, Lang established the Hope Margaret Hancock Trust, and he nominated Rinehart as trustee and his four grandchildren named as beneficiaries. Now, they were supposed to be handed control of that trust once they reached the age of 25. Now, Bianca and John say that that trust, when Lang died in 1992, was brimming with mining assets, and that includes Hope Downs. But they claim that Gina inked death warrant deals for the trust fund. She stripped it of its mining assets. She wrestled back control of its stake in Hancock Prospecting, and they claim that she essentially left it frozen in time. They also allege that this sort of unfolded in a calculated and sophisticated fraud which took place when they were teenagers. So they had no means of knowing what was actually going on. There are documents there that their lawyers have produced, which they claim are smoking gun documents, detailing what they claim was Gina's special project to get the assets back. And that's, written in confidential memorandums and legal advice on company transactions and that sort of thing. And the only reason that we're actually getting any of the details of this private family row, which has been in arbitration for some time, is because right before the trial started, Rinehart actually lost a last-ditch attempt to secure a suppression order to stop her kids from airing what are pretty messy details of this private feud. And of course, Hancock Prospecting wholly rejects these allegations. She says that Lang transferred the assets out of the family empire without her knowledge and without the knowledge of other shareholders, and he did so to siphon money out of the company and bankroll his very luxurious lifestyle with his wife, Rose Porteous.
And I wanted to ask you about this because it isn't just the fractious relationship that Gina appears to have with two of her children that this court case has exposed. It's also laid bare a feud that Gina had with her father, Lang Hancock, and her stepmother, Rose Porteous. So what have we learned about her relationships with them through this case?
Yes, that is all true, and they were central allegations in the children's case, basically backing up their assertion that the relationship was in a terrible place, and that is why Lang left his estate in the way that he did.
It was a marriage that didn't just set tongues wagging, it raised eyebrows in financial circles about the future of one of Australia's most important mining empires. How much has Rose now taken over her role in the company?
Where Georgina's left off, Rose has come in, and she's come in with a good deal of polish and that sort of thing, and it's very, very handy. She speaks several languages.
Now, obviously, Rose was brought in as a housekeeper for Lang, and she originally hailed from the Philippines. But yes, just several months after the death of Hope Hancock, he actually married Rose Porteous.
Rose, a former model from the Philippines, has been the target of a lot of gossip. Just how did she happen to meet Lang?
I never was a gold digger. I never will be. So it doesn't bother me.
Gonna stun him today, aren't you?
Gina may be taking over the business, but it's Rose who's won Lang's heart.
And that obviously triggered some concerns about how Lang was running his business and his succession plan and how he intended to leave his estate. And it wouldn't be until shortly before his death in 1992 that the pair finally patched things up. But this feud was very, very bitter. And it's worth noting that the bulk of the documents which lay bare this feud were actually supplied by her children. Now, that evidence has included a letter that Lang penned threatening to remove his daughter from the family empire for disloyalty after she allegedly tried to have his new wife, Rose Porteous, deported and left the country with her mother's will. And some racist remarks that she had made about Rose Porteous, including referring to her as an Oriental concubine. Now, that row itself prompted threats from her to sue her father for misappropriation of assets, excessive spending, and engaging in what she dubbed potentially ruinous deals, and compiling a draft petition to actually overthrow him as the head of the empire. Now, throughout the trial, we've seen all sorts of letters that he penned, but perhaps the most significant of them is the one where he vows not to leave her in a position where she could destroy his life's work. And all of that ultimately culminated in Lang telling Gina to leave him alone to, and I quote, live the rest of his life in peace. Ouch. Very serious and bitter feud.
So, Jesinta, I want to turn to what Gina Rinehart's response has been to all of these allegations against her. How have her barristers countered the claims made by both the descendants of her father's former business partners and her children, Bianca and John?
In the children's case, Hancock Prospecting is saying that Lang confessed to unlawfully taking assets out of the family empire, so out of Hancock Prospecting, on his deathbed. And he confessed to doing that as a means of siphoning money out of the company for he and his wife, Rose Porteous's luxurious lifestyle. And we've heard that that included everything from mansions to private jets and very beautiful jewellery. And he actually requested that Gina undo it. And that was a wish that Hancock Prospecting says Gina executed. Now, it also says that it had every right to take the tenements under the Handwrite Alliance, because there was a clause buried in the partnership deal which allowed them to do so. And Hancock Prospecting has outright denied that there was any sort of wrongdoing or misconduct in shifting the assets away from the trust and back into Hancock Prospecting, saying that Hancock Prospecting was never compensated for the assets when they were removed by Lang wrongfully in what they've dubbed a breach of his fiduciary duties.
So just to be clear here, in this lawsuit, Gina has alleged that her late father siphoned money from his own grandchildren on his deathbed?
No, so she is claiming that he siphoned money out of Hancock Prospecting and moved assets around various entities that he controlled in order to get money out of the business. But those assets should never have wound up in the Hope Margaret Hancock Trust that was left to the children. And it was not an asset that could be left to the children. It belonged squarely to Hancock Prospecting.
Got you. And so how has Gina responded to the allegations of the descendants of her father's former business partners?
So Hancock Prospecting says that it had every right to take the Hope Downs tenements from the Handwrite Alliance, and it says that it did so under a clause buried in the partnership deal. Now, Hancock Prospecting's lawyer, Noel Hutley, has said that there is evidence that the controlling minds of Right Prospecting at the time had known that they weren't entitled to a single cent, and in any event, the claim should actually be time-barred because they brought it so long after the deals were done. Meanwhile, Hancock Prospecting claims there's absolutely no evidence supporting Rhodes's claim that the parties entered into what he has characterised as an unwritten side deal which entitled them to royalties, and has completely rubbished that claim.
And so why is Gina fighting this case so hard, do you think? It's been going for 13 years all up, and there was one estimate in the Australian Financial Review which said that the daily legal fees for this case would top $250,000. And arguably, when you're worth $37 billion, as Gina Rinehart is, a win of $1 billion or so in royalties is perhaps a bit like change to her, though not for the rest of us. So why do you think she's fought this so hard?
It's funny you say that because I think the stakes are just so perfectly illustrated by the sheer theatre of the court. Like, the country's brightest, most expensive legal minds have been brought in to fight this battle. And it just goes to show the value of Gina's cash cow that this mine is, and the deep pockets of those fighting for a slice of it. I do think it's more about right prospecting and what that entity stands to gain and the principle. Right? They truly believe that they were swindled out of an asset that was co-owned by their father. And as for Gina and Hancock Prospecting, I mean, the allegations against her, they couldn't be more serious. They're claiming that she knowingly took profits away from the descendants of her father's business partners and defrauded her own kids. And she has the resources necessary to fight this, if she wanted to, for the rest of her life. And Gina's lawyers have pointed out that there is significant reputational damage that could be done by the allegations of misconduct and the like that have been levelled by her kids, and the highly emotive language that they've used in the case, which they claim sounds a lot like sound bites for the media. We've estimated that Hancock Prospecting and Rio Tinto, because they share joint liability for the asset, could be up for $1.22 billion, and that's just in past royalties and just if Wright wins. So we're talking a lot of money here. And if the kids win, well, they get the project, and that would be pretty extraordinary.
And so we won't find out what the judge's finding is until early next year.
Yeah, the case wrapped up on December 13 after 51 days of trial, and Justice Jennifer Smith is expected to hand down her findings in what will no doubt be a very lengthy judgment in 2024. But in closing, she actually said it was one of the best trials that she'd ever presided over, which I thought was fascinating, and reminded the parties that although they seemed to want to have the last word and be fighting to have the last word, that ultimately that would be her. So that was quite amusing. But I'm not so sure that she will have the last word. I think this case has got a fair way to run just yet.
I mean, it's not every day that you cover a trial which has plot points that seem to sort of be ripped out of a Netflix TV show. So we are lucky, Jesinta, that you've been covering this. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Today's episode of Please Explain was produced by Julia Carr-Katzel, with technical assistance by David McMillan. Our executive producer is Ruby Schwartz. Please Explain is a production of The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. If you enjoy the show and want more of our journalism, subscribe to our newspapers today. It's the best way to support what we do. Search The Age or smh.com.au/subscribe. I'm Samantha Selinger Morris. This is Please Explain. Thanks for listening.